Most people set out wanting to do something significant, not necessarily famous, but meaningful, something that would justify the whole effort of a life. And then the years arrive with their compromises and obligations and small daily necessities, and the enormous thing never quite happens. The question that eventually visits almost everyone is whether a life that achieved nothing memorable was therefore a life wasted. A novel written in the 19th century, often called the greatest novel in the English language, spends nearly 1,000 pages on exactly this question, and its answer is one of the most consoling things in all of literature. That novel is Middlemarch by George Eliot, a sweeping portrait of an ordinary provincial town and the intertwined lives inside it. It follows several people, most centrally a young woman of enormous idealism who longs to do something great with her life and cannot find any avenue for it, and a gifted young doctor whose ambitions are slowly worn down by circumstance and compromise. Beneath its vast scale lies one of the most searching explorations ever written of ambition, disappointment, marriage, and the value of an unremarkable life. From the start, the book studies the psychology of thwarted idealism. The central character is intelligent, morally serious, and desperate to be useful in some large way, and she is born into a life that offers her almost no channel for any of it. The author renders this frustration with enormous sympathy, showing how a great capacity with nowhere to go turns inward and becomes restlessness. The story explores what happens to significant energy that finds no outlet. It invites a reflection that lands for many people. Have you ever felt capable of far more than your circumstances have ever asked of you? The novel also explores how people marry their illusions rather than each other. The central character marries a man she has constructed almost entirely in her own imagination, projecting depth, purpose, and grandeur onto someone who is, in reality, insecure and small. The author is careful to show that she is not foolish, she is idealistic, and idealism is precisely what makes this error possible. The story examines how we fall in love with the version of a person our longing requires. It raises a question worth sitting with. How much of what you have believed about someone was actually about what you needed them to be? A central concern of the book is the way ambition erodes rather than collapses. The young doctor does not fail dramatically. He is worn down gradually by debt, by social pressure, by a marriage that quietly requires him to abandon his standards, by 100 small accommodations, none of which felt fatal at the time. The author traces this with painful precision. The story explores how a person's most important intentions are usually lost not in a single betrayal, but in an accumulation of reasonable compromises. It invites you to notice which of your own principles have been quietly negotiated away, one small concession at a time. The novel also examines money as a moral force. Debt in this book is not a background detail, it is the invisible hand that bends character, that makes proud people ask for help, that turns love into resentment, that quietly determines what a person is able to be. The author refuses to treat financial pressure as beneath serious literature. The story explores how much of what looks like a failure of character is really the slow work of material necessity. It invites you to consider how your own circumstances have shaped choices you would prefer to think were purely moral. There is also a profound study of how one person can never fully know another. The author moves through many minds, showing you exactly what each character intends, fears, and misunderstands, so that you watch two people in the same room, both acting in good faith, both completely misreading the other. The story explores the fundamental loneliness woven into even loving relationships, the way each person is finally sealed inside their own perspective. It invites you to reflect on how differently the people you love might be experiencing the same moments you share. The narrative structure, weaving many lives across a whole community without privileging any single one, is central to the book's meaning. The author refuses to make anyone the hero, insisting instead that every one of these people is the center of their own story, with an interior life as vivid and urgent as anyone else's. The story explores what happens when a novel takes seriously the idea that everyone matters equally. It invites you to consider the strangers you passed today, each carrying a life as complicated and consuming as your own. The novel also studies the quiet, unrecorded good that ordinary people do. The central character never achieves her grand purpose. What she does instead is help one person here, change one mind there, offer kindness at a moment that it mattered enormously to someone else and was noticed by no one else. The author suggests that the world is held together largely by such acts. The story explores the difference between a life that is remembered and a life that mattered. It invites you to consider the unrecorded kindnesses that have shaped your own life and who performed them. There is also an honest treatment of the disappointment inside marriage and the slow work of repair. The author does not offer easy rescues. Some marriages in the book simply become the thing the people inside them must live with, and the couples who find their way through do so by a series of unglamorous, difficult acts of honesty and generosity. The story explores how a shared life is sustained by daily effort rather than by feeling. It invites you to consider what maintenance the important relationships in your own life quietly require. The novel also examines the way a community's opinion becomes a kind of fate. Rumor, assumption, and collective judgment settle around characters and determine what is possible for them, regardless of the truth. The author shows how a person can be sentenced by gossip without any trial ever taking place. The story explores how much of a life is shaped by what other people have decided about it. It invites you to consider how carefully you hold your own conclusions about people you barely know. The emotional arc of the book moves from soaring ambition through disillusionment into something the author clearly considers wiser and better, a mature acceptance that finds meaning in the scale actually available to a person. The story does not treat this as settling, it treats it as growing up. It explores how the surrender of a grandiose vision can be the beginning of a genuinely useful life. It invites you to reflect on the moment you released a dream and what became possible afterward. The book's final suggestion is one of the most quietly moving passages in literature. The author proposes that the improving state of the world depends significantly on acts that were never recorded, and that the reason things are not worse for you and everyone else is largely thanks to people who lived faithfully in obscurity and lie in graves no one visits. The story explores how enormous the cumulative effect of small goodness actually is. It invites you to consider that your own unremarkable decency may be doing more than you will ever know. The novel also gives extraordinary attention to the moment a person first truly perceives that someone else exists as fully as they do. The author describes the ordinary state of a young person as a kind of moral stupidity in which the whole world is arranged around their own feelings, and treats the discovery that another person has an equal and separate center of self as one of the most important events in a life. The story explores this shift from self-centered vision to genuine perception of others as the beginning of maturity. It invites you to consider when you first understood, not as an idea, but as a felt reality, that the people around you were as real to themselves as you are to you. There is also a quietly devastating portrait of a man who has spent his whole life on a project he secretly suspects is worthless. The scholar the central character marries has been assembling a great work for decades, and beneath his coldness lies a terror that he has wasted everything and will be found out. The author treats him with unexpected compassion rather than contempt, letting you feel the fear underneath the pride. The story explores how much of what looks like arrogance is really a person defending themselves against their own doubt. It invites you to consider the people whose coldness you have judged without ever wondering what fear was underneath it. There is also a striking exploration of forgiveness that costs something. Late in the book, characters must decide whether to extend mercy to someone who has genuinely wronged them, and the author refuses to make it easy or automatic. The mercy that appears is deliberate, difficult, and chosen rather than felt. The story explores how forgiveness is often an act of will performed before the heart has caught up. It invites you to reflect on a moment when you chose generosity towards someone who had not earned it and what that choice required of you. In the end, Middlemarch leaves you with an unexpected consolation about your own ordinary life. It suggests that thwarted ambition is not the same as a wasted life, that character is decided in accumulated small choices, and that the world is quietly held up by people history will never name. A story that makes an unremarkable life look like a genuine achievement offers something rare and lasting. Books aren't just stories, they're mirrors that help us understand ourselves better. Comment below with the book you would like explored next, and the person's unrecorded kindness quietly shaped your life. If this kind of reflective book analysis means something to you, consider liking and subscribing so more of it can reach you. This video uses AI-generated audio and visuals for educational purposes only. This is just one reader's personal thoughts and interpretations.